Record. And what I typically do is just record the presentation part of this meeting, and then we'll stop it for discussion and conversation. So I won't post that part. But it is wonderful to see folks here. And this is the Legal Wellbeing Network, and I'm Heidi Alexander, and I know many of you. I'm the director of the SJC Standing Committee on Lawyer Wellbeing, and we've been meeting with this group every other month for 2 years now. Actually, a little bit over 2 years. I think we started the first one in November of 2020. So we are drawing a diverse group of people who are all committed to improving well-being in the profession. And it's great to see people here. I love seeing new folks and familiar faces as well. What we've been trying to do is bring in presenters that can share information that will be helpful to you, helpful to your workplaces, and to your efforts towards well-being, both organizationally and individually. We also have a repository of resources from these meetings, which are the recordings and materials that are available on our website. I'll put that in the chat. Last meeting, which was in October, we had Nicole Denamer, who's a former litigator and now is a consultant, and she focuses her work on building healthier legal organizations. Her work is focused on an area that we may not typically think about in our work, and that's the physical space and how it can support health and well-being. And so we did not record her presentation, but she has provided a number of different resources, and she's also created a bunch of smaller YouTube videos that are responsive to a number of questions that people had last meeting. So I'm going to post all of those on the website as well. So today we have a few folks joining us, a few guests joining us. We have Lori Mahalik-Levin and Lauren Gordon and Alyssa Goodman, and they're all involved in some way with Mindful Return, which is a resource which was founded by Lori, and Lori is a former partner at Dentons. And the resource is for parents returning to the workplace after caring for a new child. And I know Lori will talk a little bit more about that. We'll put the links in the chat as well. They're going to speak for a bit, and we'll open it up for discussion for the remainder of the meeting. Very apropos of the topic, I have a couple of kids home sick, and my partner is away. So apologies in advance. Something comes up and I have to run off. Just a couple of notes. If you would like, please feel free to add your name in the chat and your affiliation and contact information so that you can network with other folks, because we don't typically distribute a list of folks who have been here. And great recommendations from Steve Seckler early on was that when you speak, if you ask a question or comment, if you could just introduce yourself, that would be fantastic. So before I turn to our guests, I do want to give just a couple of updates from the SJC committee, which will be very quick. First, and I talked about this at the last meeting, was that we had released the first lawyer census report in Massachusetts. It's available on our website. Some of you have heard me talk about this at length. We are working on an interactive data tool that will allow for filtering results, for example, by demographics, counties, bar associations, practice area, and more. The results are really important to our efforts to increase diversity of our bar and also to support lawyers throughout the Commonwealth. So we're continuing to look for opportunities to discuss the results of this survey and think about the next steps. So if you have any interest, if you're part of a bar association or your firm, or anyone who is interested in talking more about these results, we would love those opportunities. The second thing I wanted to mention is that we launched a partnership with the Health Connector for Business, and that is specifically to help alleviate pressure on small firms by offering a resource to simplify and customize access to health and dental insurance. This is available to firms with 50 or fewer employees. And we have been conducting a series of webinars with Q&As with folks from the Health Connector for Business, the Massachusetts Health Connector for Business. And we actually have one next week, which is a webinar with Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers and the Law Office Management Assistance Program. It'll be a 30-minute webinar on December 14th at 12 p.m. And I will put that into the chat unless Rachel beats me to it. And then the third thing is that we are wrapping up the mentorship program that we launched a couple of years ago, a statewide mentorship program. And thank you to, I see some folks here who are serving as mentors, so thank you for that. We're going to begin a new session in April. And so I hope that people will join or rejoin as mentors. Just to note that anyone can sign up to be a mentee regardless of how much experience you have. And this is a micro mentoring program. So it's really meant to sort of connect people with multiple folks and give them access to a number of different perspectives. So I will share that information as well. As always, there's a lot going on in the sort of the world of well-being in the law, lots of new reports and studies and articles. And so we're continuing to try to aggregate a lot of that on our site. So we have that there as a resource. Our next meeting, if you want to mark your calendars, and I'll put this in the chat as well, is February the 15th, February 15th, same time. And at that time, we are hoping that we might actually have results from a well-being survey that was conducted this past year with Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers, and might be able to share and talk about those results. So exciting stuff. So now I would like to turn it over to our speakers to share information with you, and please feel free to ask questions in the chat. We're definitely going to have a period for discussion as well. So Lori, Alyssa, and Lauren, I'll turn it over to you now.
Wonderful. Thank you, Heidi. It's really wonderful to be here with all of you. Thank you for inviting us. I'm really honored to be here with Lauren Gordon and Alyssa Goodman, who are two friends and colleagues. And we are talking today about new parenthood and all the trials and tribulations that come with that. I'm going to pause for just a moment while I put my slides up and hope that you all can see them. Yes, thumbs up. You can see them. Yes. All right. Fantastic. So new parent transition challenges. There are many, many, many challenges when one becomes a working parent. And the three of us are here to talk about sort of our own experiences. We are all working parents ourselves, and how we got involved in the well-being space around working parenthood. But first, I'd like to frame our conversation and put it into context by saying that caregiving for your colleagues is something that affects a large number of people who you work with, inevitably. Nationally, parents with children of kids who are under the age of 18 make up 40% of all households. And there is a whole group of people, many of us are calling ourselves either sandwich generation or panini generation right now, who are providing care to older adults as well, right? So caregiving makes up a lot of what is happening outside of our work lives. I also want to throw up a statistic that bothers me and gets me worked up every time I see it, which is that in the United States, 64% of women return to work after having a child. Now, I think the three of us who are here today to talk would say that yes, absolutely, there's an element of choice in terms of going back or not. And we know that a lot of new moms in particular don't feel like they have a meaningful choice at the end of the day about whether they're going to have a career and be a working parent. An interesting additional data point is that 34% of the people who did not return to work after parental leave said that it was because of poor manager support. They felt like their manager, their employer wasn't really supporting them through the process. We call this in the working parent field winning the manager lottery. And it shouldn't have to be that you win the manager lottery to have to, have a good return to work after parental leave. So I guess one takeaway that I would offer, just even before we really dig in, is to know your own data. Look at your own organization and say, what are our parental leave take-up rates? Or are moms taking it, or are dads taking it? And who's coming back? How long are they staying after they come back? This number doesn't have to be this number. We know from studies and data that when an organization provides support around the transition into and out of parental leave, this number can look very, very different. Okay, so in turn, the three of us are going to be talking about three particular pain points that new parents hit along the path to working parenthood. I'm going to be talking about isolation and a really challenging cultural narrative that a lot of people butt up against. It's true definitely in the legal profession and beyond. Then Lauren's going to be talking us through mindset and limiting beliefs, particularly the pain point around guilt that many new parents experience as they return to work. And then Alyssa is going to be talking about the mental load that new parents and working parents in general carry in the division of household labor. So those three we will turn to one at a time. Okay, so isolation and a challenging cultural narrative. My passion for well-being around this new parent topic really began from my own story. And I'll start off just by saying that I wear three hats in life. Okay, so we all wear 7,000 hats in life, but I wear three main hats in life. One is that I am mom to two wonderful redheaded boys who are 9 and 11 years old. They're in 4th and 6th grade. We live in Washington, D.C. And side note, my boys were home for 15 straight months during the pandemic, and holy cow, that was like the hardest period of time. Okay, so hat number one is mom. Hat number two is that I am a lawyer. I'm in private practice. I have my own firm, but as Heidi mentioned, I was a partner at Denton's up until last summer. I also have practiced in an in-house setting and have practiced in a couple of other firms as a baby lawyer and associate. And hat number three is that I am the founder and CEO of this program, Mindful Return, that I'll tell you a little bit more about, but it was very much born out of my own experience. I also wrote a book called Back to Work After Baby that you can see pictured here, and you can find on all the usual places one locates books. So my journey began here. This is probably the first photo that exists of me like doing the work plus baby thing with the child strapped to me. And I also took that same child, this is my now almost 12-year-old, into work to visit my colleagues after he was born. And I found that initial period of becoming a parent and trying to figure out who the heck I was in the world and how all of this was going to fit together extremely disorienting. But I didn't really have words for it or know, what to do about it. I did consult with the Google, because that's what one does, right? You go to the Google and you say, working mom, return to work from maternity leave, what to do? And the advice I was given at the time, now granted, given this is like 11 years ago, was don't put a photo of my baby on my desk or people won't take me seriously. Don't talk about my kids or no one will take me seriously. And oh, you might leak on your shirt if you're pumping. And that advice was both ridiculously unhelpful and quite snarky. So I moved along and, muddled through, and then had baby number 2 years later. Now, baby number 2 for me was where I really, really started feeling the pain point that I'm talking about here. The pain point number 1 around feeling very isolated. I didn't know how I was going to make everything work. Like my hours were long, my 2 babies, one was up at night trying to potty train, the other one was up at night because he needed to eat all the time. And I felt very, very alone. I was crying on the kitchen floor way more times than I would like to admit, and just the wheels were coming off. Also, the cultural narrative that I experienced was, and this is sort of cliche, but you're meant to parent as though you don't work, and you're meant to work as though you don't parent. I wasn't quite sure how to fit those two things together. So, because I had so much spare time with an infant and a baby, I decided that I was going to set out to create a resource that I wished had existed for myself. My husband and I like to say that we had baby number 1 and that was fine. And then baby number 2, 1 + 1 = 85, and everything in our world was turned upside down. At the time when I was struggling most, I am fairly certain that I had some undiagnosed postpartum anxiety. I went again back to the Google to say, like, how can I help myself out of this dark place? And I stumbled upon a program called the Abundant Mama Project, which was an online group of about 100 moms who all got together and were all trying to figure out how to find the abundance in life instead of just the overwhelm. And I took this 4-week program, and I like adopted practices around gratitude and abundance that completely shifted how I was viewing working parenthood. And after taking this course, I said to my husband, who is an MBA entrepreneur type, I'm the legal risk averse type, so this was not in my nature to do, but he says to me, well, what are you going to do about the fact that there's nothing that really exists for new parents in this transition? So I started blogging. I decided to create a program that would support lawyers and other new parents through the transition back to work. I created a returning to work community at my office, which was really like my first of several attempts at starting an employee resource group. And I created the Mindful Return program that I can tell you more about. I named this program Mindful Return because for me, mindfulness really means two things, and all of the programming and work that we do incorporates both of the elements of mindfulness that I'm about to list here. One is the traditional notion of mindfulness that we think of about being present. And we focus on how the new parents and the working parents in our programs can be present with their family when they're with their family, and present in their career and their job and their work when they're working. We also focus on the mindful, intentional, jujitsu, thoughtful planning that goes into making every single day as a working parent actually function. So all of our work really incorporates both of these elements of mindfulness. My boys, as I said, are so much older now. My oldest actually walks himself to school. This was one of the moments during the pandemic when they actually were happy with each other. It didn't happen all that frequently in the 15 months that they were forced to be together, but I had to capture it on camera when it did. And as my children have grown, Mindful Return as a program and as my passion and as part of my life has grown. It's now about 85% of my work week, and I practice law as a side gig in the other 15%. And just to tell you a little bit more about this Mindful Return program that I created, really it's a group support and course all intertwined. And it's a 4-week-long program, cohort-based, so everyone in it is basically going back to work around the same time as the other people. The courses combine both an educational curriculum, so giving high-quality content that is much more helpful than you might leak on your shirt and don't put a family photo on your desk, and peer mentoring, so that people can interact and support one another. Each of the 4 weeks of our program focuses on a different theme. We have a week all about mindful mindset. This is about finding the abundance and about perspective taking and putting into practice micro mindfulness practices that are practical for people who don't have very much time. The second week is all about the logistics of return and navigating childcare transitions and schedules and figuring out what your work hours are going to be and how you're going to put food on your own table at night and all the logistical stuff. The third week is all about leadership and inspiring people to change that cultural narrative that somehow says you are less valuable at work now that you have a child, and instead flipping it to really focus on all the skills that we gain through parenthood that are very relevant to our jobs and that make us really amazing leaders. And then the fourth week is all about community building and making sure that no one is sitting on the kitchen floor crying alone like I did for way too long. All of our courses and programs take place on a mobile-friendly private web portal through a course software platform called Ruzuku. And it allows people to show up as anonymously or as identifiably as they want. And they can do it from their phone in the middle of the night while they're breastfeeding or things like that. All of our programs for new parents are also asynchronous so that people can participate no matter what time of day or night they want to interact with the program. We know that new parents have a hard time saying, I will be at X place at X time when they have a 2-month-old in the house. We also are very deep believers in making sure that people continue to receive ongoing support. One of my catchphrases in this work is that the transition back to work after a parental leave is not an event. It is a process, and it's a process that takes time. It took me about a year to feel like I had everything kind of figured out. So we have a post-program Facebook and LinkedIn alumni community. And then we hold 2 calls every month to support working parents, even after they've taken the program and they're integrating back into work. They also have indefinite access to all of our course lessons so that people can return to it anytime. So the way that we teach this program really is through blog post length lessons. About 2/3 of them are things that I wrote based on my own research and experience. And then about 1/3 of them are written by experts in areas where I just wasn't the mental health or well-being expert. So for example, we have a clinical psychologist who focuses on perinatal anxiety issues, being the person talking about anxiety and worry in new parenthood. So we've got a lesson and then a prompt for people to engage with, a question that either I or the invited lesson author wrote. And then we have these message boards where people write back and forth to each other and support one another and post photos of themselves and adorable pictures of their babies, and just a way for people to feel heard and seen in new parenthood. As I said, our programs have grown as my children have grown, and we now have maternity and paternity leave courses that are offered every other month. We have a chapter in the United Kingdom, we've got a chapter in India, we've got South Africa chapters, and at the request of some of the employers that we work with, we've also expanded into Spanish and Portuguese for the folks who have, either Spanish-speaking employees in the United States or have offices in Latin and South America. So I think, yes, that's my section. Pain point, isolation, and the narrative. My work really is about connecting people so that they're not feeling alone and giving them a new narrative, which is that you can do this, and you will not only come back stronger, but with new useful skills that are going to help you in your career. Passing the baton over to Lauren to share her story. And Lauren, you can just say next whenever you want me to shift the slides.
Perfect. Thank you, Lori. So you can flip actually to the next slide. It's good afternoon, everyone. It is so wonderful to be here and to hear Lori's story. You're going to see so many parallels as I share mine. And I feel so fortunate to be connected with Mindful Return and the work that Lori talked about. It is so critically important for all of our work colleagues. Just by way of introduction, I'm Lauren Gordon. I am wearing many hats, like Lori said. From a personal front, I'm a wife to my husband, Eli. We have 3 young daughters together. And then on the professional side, I have a corporate role in human resources at a global financial services company. And then I'm also an entrepreneur. I'm a certified coach. I run a coaching practice for working parents, and I teach and coach inside of Mindful Return. So I have navigated 3 very different returns to work. You're going to hear how drastically different they were. But I thought, Lori, you can flip to the next slide. I'd anchor us all in why this pain point is so important. So mindset and limiting beliefs. I thought I'd start with some data, just most broadly. The average human being, each of us, we have about 70,000 thoughts per day. Some of them are good, some of them are neutral, some of them are negative. And as working parents, working mothers in particular, I thought I'd anchor us in a Harris poll data conducted by CVS Health in 2022. We know that about 42% of working mothers have been diagnosed with anxiety or depression. And at the highest level, for those that know cognitive behavioral therapy, or if you've heard things like your thoughts cause your feelings and your feelings cause your actions, these working mothers that are feeling a certain way are taking action. And while there's not a direct correlation between the third piece of data that I have on the far right, we can surmise that of the 1 million US women that have left the workforce in 2022, many of them were working mothers, and it's largely stemming from how they're feeling, which is coming from the thoughts that they have. On the next slide, I'm going to transition into my personal experience, and I'll first say, I'm going to do it through pictures. We've all heard the quote, "A picture is worth 1,000 words." And what I'll share when I share each picture of my leave, I like to say that each picture is worth about 70,000 thoughts that I was having. So Lori, on the next slide, we'll anchor there for just a few minutes. This was me for each of my 3 maternity leaves. I'm going to start on the far left, a picture of my husband and I and my oldest daughter, Cecilia. We're actually on the beach in Italy just a few weeks before my maternity leave was ending. And I've captioned this one, "Ignorance is bliss," as I think about the thoughts that I was having, because the smile on my face was so genuine and it was very uninformed. What I would come to find just a few weeks later was that I had absolutely no idea the emotional toll that it would take returning to work. I had no idea what it would feel like to drop my tiny daughter off at daycare in very capable hands of a teacher, but hearing her cries and walking out the door knowing that I was leaving her there. I had no idea what it would feel like to be pumping breast milk at work in an empty office, feeling the pressures of not producing enough for her and the deadlines and the calendar invites piling up while I was doing it. And I had no idea what it would feel like to lay awake at night, despite sheer exhaustion, ruminating and feeling like I was failing at work and I was failing at home. And I share all of that to also mention that I was fortunate enough to have a very supportive leader at the time. I was working for our chief human resources officer. She was a working parent herself. And I had that external support, but where I struggled, it was the internal struggle. It was my mindset, it was my limiting beliefs, and I had no tools and no techniques to manage through that. My heart personally goes out to our working parent colleagues, all of us who do not have the external support that I had, but that also have those internal struggles that I had. So if we shift to we'll stay on this slide, but the middle picture 2 years later, I'm now a mom of 2 at the time. And I captioned this one, fear of the known, because I knew how hard my maternity leave end had been just 2 years prior. And I did what Lori had done 11 years ago. I was out on Google and I was desperately searching for help. And I thankfully came across the Mindful Return course. So in 2018, just before this picture was taken, I was a participant in the course Lori described. I felt so much more equipped to head back to work. And I felt less alone just being for 4 weeks in a community of fellow working moms that were struggling like I was, but also building each other's confidence. Interestingly, in this photo, just a few weeks later, I felt a new struggle. And that struggle was I was no longer a new mom after I had been back at work for several weeks and several months. I was then put into this bucket with everybody else, everyone else that had competing deadlines, that had expectations. And I felt as though people forgot that I had young daughters at home and that I was just still recovering emotionally and physically. And so it was those struggles that brought on month after month, lots of tears, lots of anxiety, lots of pressures. The breaking point I reached, it was in 2019. I was talking with my husband and I said, I need to do something. I can't live this way. I think we're at a fork in the road. I either need to step back or out of the workforce, which I did not want to do, or I needed to double down and figure out what was going on in my brain. So when we thought about thoughts were causing my feelings and my feelings were driving my actions. And that thankfully was the path that I took. I had been a certified coach for at the time 5 or 6 years. I ended up getting a second coaching certification through a deep dive intensive on our thoughts and changing our thoughts, ending our limiting beliefs. And that thankfully brought me to where I am today, the picture on the far right. For the past 2 years, so I welcomed our third daughter, March of 2020, just before the pandemic and just before everything changed. And I felt so equipped. I felt emotionally equipped. I felt strategically equipped to handle a return to work. But I also realized that I could become this example of what is possible for other working moms and other working parents if I could just teach what I had learned and teach others. So it was during that time on the far right that I opened my own virtual coaching practice and also had the great fortune of reconnecting with Lori and having the opportunity to teach and coach within Mindful Return. If we flip to the next slide, I'll just briefly anchor us to a quote that I pulled from a book called Work Parent by Daisy Dowling. It's published by Harvard Business Review Press. And Daisy covers a number of different topics for working parents, but one is about listening to your inner critic and learning how to quiet it. Daisy gives some examples of where working parents may struggle the most, but I thought most importantly at the bottom of the slide, Daisy advises the reader to know first and foremost that you are not alone and know that you have the power to make yourself feel better. So one of the ways that we do that through the Mindful Return offer, if we flip to the last slide, is through one-on-one coaching. So Lori talked about the group coaching and the group courses. Another piece that we add of value is one-on-one coaching. I offer it as a fellow working parent and certified coach. And I thought I'd just briefly highlight 3 benefits. One being the personalized support. So the person that I'm working with one-on-one gets to tackle what exactly it is that they're struggling with. And I'm also trained to listen for limiting beliefs. Oftentimes it's the thoughts they don't even realize that they're having. We go very deep. It's always, for my fellow certified coaches here, it's always the client's agenda. So we go deep on what it is that they need. And then I offer the accountability. So we're checking in at the beginning of calls. We're committing to action plans at the end of calls. And in the event obstacles arise, we're strategizing and we're working through them together. So I'll pause here, would love to share more about it in Q&A, and I'll hand the mic over to Alyssa.
Thanks so much, Lauren and Lori and Heidi, for the invitation. So I'm going to talk about this third pain point that we see often for new parents returning to work, the mental load and division of household labor. On the next slide, I'll just first quickly share an introduction. Similar to Lori and Lauren, I am wearing multiple hats. First, I am a partner to Jake and mom to two little ones, almost 6-year-old and a 2.5-year-old who was born just a few months into the pandemic back in May of 2020. We live in Maryland, just outside of DC. On the professional side, I am a former educator and operations specialist turned perinatal social worker after my own transition to parenthood. I'm also a trained postpartum doula and a certified Fair Play facilitator. Through the therapy and postpartum support groups and coaching work that I do, I support individuals and families during the perinatal period, which is the time when they are thinking about expanding their families through the first few years of their children's lives. What I hear across all of the different roles that I've held, especially in recent years, is this pain point of the inequitable division of household labor. In our country, in the US, this is so often skewed in partnerships, most often impacting women and mothers as they're returning to work. Similar to Lori and Lauren, it was through these personal experiences that I had that I became really passionate about finding an answer and a solution to these inequities in our homes. I believed as a new parent that I should be able to do it all, work outside of the home, manage our home in the spare moments that I had, and believed that because of my personal situation, I had more flexibility in my role. I felt like this was just part of my role and what I needed to be doing. As we prepared to welcome our second child in 2020 with the pandemic just beginning, I realized that I was really close to burnout myself and that something needed to change at home so that I could feel more supported to show up in the workplace in the way that I wanted to. So I went on a mission through Google and through looking at other resources to find out how I could tackle this. And then once I found a solution that ended up working for me personally, I wanted to find a way to be able to share that with others. So I'll share a little bit more about that. On the next slide, first, though, I want to zoom out again, share some data points that we have, because I think what's important is, again, this idea of making sure that new parents are not feeling isolated. I certainly felt isolated. I felt like this was an individual problem. It was something I couldn't figure out or something that my family was struggling with, and others seemed to have it together. And my coworkers seemed to find ways to make this work. And in my own research, I found that this certainly wasn't the case. These statistics share it from these last few years. Mothers reduced their time spent working 4.5 times more than fathers did during the initial years of COVID-19. And there was an estimated 2.3 million cases of burnout among working mothers due to unequal demands of home and work life. Another McKinsey report from this year noted that 81% of women and 63% of men are in dual career couples. And within opposite gender dual career couples, women are 4 times more likely than men to take on tasks at home, regardless of who earns more. This is not equitable, and it's leading to mass numbers of burnout. These statistics were somewhat comforting to me and reminding me that I was not alone, but also lit the fire under me to work to find a solution and be able to share that with others so that women didn't have to, as Lori mentioned, work as if they didn't have children and parent like they didn't work outside of the home. So I'm going to share some of what those resources are. But before I dig into one of the possible solutions, I want to share a little bit more about what this can look like from the higher level numbers. That's helpful to see, know that it's not an individual problem. And we're certainly not alone in experiencing some of these inequities in our homes or for our workforce to be experiencing them. But I want to talk about what this looks like and how it may be showing up and impacting those within your own organizations. So you may have heard the term the default parent. This is the assumed role that one parent takes on after the birth of a child or welcoming a child into the family. And a term that has recently come out in recent years is the she-fault parent, because it is often defaulting to women in cisgender heterosexual couples. So I want to talk through these 4 terms at the top and give a brief example from my own experience and how this showed up in our family. So the second shift is talking about when someone's working outside of the home, but once they get back to their home, they still have another full-time job to be doing. For me, this was coming home from work, being with my children, figuring out dinner, taking my older son to activities, making sure the laundry and the dishes were done, managing our household in so many ways. The emotional labor covers things like calling in-laws or sending thank you notes, remembering birthdays and celebrations, providing middle of the night comfort to children when they need that. This wasn't something that my partner and I talked about beforehand. We just kind of fell into them, but I want to note it's not because I was any better at them. It was just a pattern that we fell into and something that we needed to find a way to break out of once we were able to recognize it. The mental load is the never-ending mental to-do list that we all keep in our minds, but holding too much of that or feeling like it's skewed toward one person in a partnership can lead to stress, fatigue, and even forgetfulness. So this image at the bottom of the screen may resonate with some of you or some of those in your own organizations. And what we want to try and do is help lighten that load so that folks are not getting to the point of burnout. And invisible work covers all of the behind the scenes things. So for me, this was thinking, do we have enough laundry detergent? Do we have enough toothpaste in the bathroom? Do our children have clothes in the right size? And this, again, never ending list that I felt like I was taking on as the she-fault parent in my home. But we know that, again, this does not need to be the case. And we want to work to find a way to make this better so that women are supported and are able to be more mindful and present in their work roles, having their loads from home lightened a bit. So on the next slide, this is where Fair Play comes in. In addition to the things that Lori and Lauren have already mentioned, the finding the community and the one-on-one coaching, it's also really important to share the tools that we have to create more equity within the home. Fair Play was developed by Eve Rodsky, who's a Harvard-trained organizational management consultant and mediator. She has a book that she wrote a few years ago. There's a deck of cards that goes with it and a documentary that came out this past July, which is now on Hulu and other major streaming device or platforms. The Fair Play method is a system of household and caregiving management that values all of the unpaid labor and rebalances responsibilities to align with one's family and values. At the heart of Fair Play, we believe that all time is equal and valued, and invisible work only becomes more visible by explicitly defining the mental load of each task, which we call conception and planning, as well as the execution of completing the task, which is the piece that we often see. And most importantly, we believe that partners need to establish a minimum standard for each task and have explicit conversations around that so that expectations are aligned and the value behind each card or each task is understood within the partnership. On the next slide, I wanted to share briefly part of Eve's work in writing her book and putting together this system was interviewing more than 500 people from all walks of life to figure out what the invisible work in a family actually entails, how to get it all done efficiently, and why our homes are our most important organizations when thinking about this new work-life integration. There are 4 tenets that are outlined on the screen here that she found were essential to the healthy functioning of a home. These may look familiar. You may feel that they resonate for your organizations as well. There are many commonalities, but important to call out explicit to the home because I think it's an important mindset shift for many as they're diving into these conversations. So the explicitly defined expectations that ties to the minimum standard of care that we discuss in the method, fairness and transparency, and also knowing your and your partner's roles tie into how we use the actual cards. There are physical cards that we have that divide up the different tasks that may be required within a home to make sure that those expectations are clear. And then the accountability and trust is walking through the conception, the planning, the execution piece. And again, supporting partners, supporting families. This can go for roommates as well. It certainly does not need to be for just partnered new parents. We want to help in supporting folks at home to have those conversations, to build up the systems that they need so that work at home is more equitably divided, so that both individuals, if they are in a partnership, are able to step into the workplace in the way that they're wanting. So in the last slide, I just wanted to highlight a couple of ways that Fair Play can support individuals and also can support partnerships. There is, similar to one-on-one coaching, there is also coaching that can be done for individuals and couples or co-parents with a certified Fair Play facilitator. Lori and I also offer both virtual workshops and in-person retreats to really give folks the time and space to dive deeper into the tenets of fair play and how to start thinking about implementing them in their own homes and setting boundaries and giving themselves that permission and time to incorporate a system to really help elevate their home life to the next level. I'll pass it back to you, Lori.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alyssa, and thank you, Lauren. The last message that I want to leave everyone with today is that messaging to your colleagues really, really matters. How you talk to them, how you welcome them back from a parental leave, how you tell them you believe in them for the long run, even if they may be a little foggy as they're returning, really, really matters. Telling them that they are and are going to be even better leaders after they return matters. Providing them supports matters. It will change your numbers. It will change the attitudes of the people who are returning. I wanted to note that, sort of a little separately from Mindful Return, but related, I run a network called the Working Parent Group Network, which is made up of about 250 leaders of working parent affinity groups and employee resource groups, or ERGs. And so if your organization has a working parent or a caregiver group and they would like to join us, it's a free group. We just get together once a month by Zoom to share ideas and resources. I'm a serial founder of working parent groups, both at a trade association where I was in-house and also at Denton's. And I felt as though I was always recreating the wheel, and working parents don't have time to recreate the wheel. So I started collecting people who were all doing this type of work, and we use this platform and email list to share resources. Speaking of email, if you're interested in staying up to date on Mindful Returns programs, I would invite you to join our employer mailing list. We've got a link here, and I'm happy to circulate these slides. I'll send the copy over to Heidi and she can distribute them. You can also learn more about our work at mindfulreturn.com. I do a weekly Tuesday tip for working parents on Instagram that you can find at Mindful Return on Instagram. And I'd invite you also just to connect with the three of us over on LinkedIn. We would love to stay in touch and share whatever resources we have for supporting working parents. So I'm going to stop the screen share. We would love to engage in a conversation with all of you. I feel like I should pass the baton back to Heidi in case you have anything that you want to say as we begin the broader conversation here.
Sure. Well, first, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your own stories and all of your work for supporting professionals and specifically helping to make the workplace more equitable. So we appreciate you being here and all the work that you're doing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording